BEDDER-MEDA, taking the eye out of media, and I can't really put it into words how appreciative I am for you being here. I'm gonna let people know who you are. Professional fighter, record of 21-8, made it to the pinnacle of the sport, was able to fight there twice, has choked out a lot of guys. I'm guessing from the layman, the spider, maybe that's because guys thought you had 8 arms and 8 legs, maybe?
Yeah,
maybe there's a little bit of that. We have retired professional fighter, made it to the UFC, fought Drew Dober.
Yeah.
What a big deal that is.
Hey, can you hit him with the applause button?
I certainly can. I certainly can.
He deserves it. He deserves it.
Applause button.
Tj Obrian is here. Yeah. He's here, baby. We're so happy. Seriously, thank you so much for being here, man.
Yeah, that's cool. I haven't got applause for a while, so that felt good.
Can I start there? How was it to fight Drew Dober? I'm actually a fan of his currently, so fun now.
Yeah, that was a cool experience. That was out in Omaha.
Can you pull the mic a little closer?
Yeah. So before he got signed to the UFC, I might have been the last fight before that he might have punched his ticket with me, honestly. But he went to the UFC. We fought out in Omaha in a square cage. It was a pretty cool setup. Victory Fighting Championships used to be
so cool.
One of the biggest promotions in the Midwest, if not the country. For the amateur scene and. Not amateur scene, but local scene, I should say. But it was cool. Fighting Drew, though, he got me in the second with the choke, which I didn't expect. But when I was fighting him, he just has some real good coaches around him, even back then, and he's a real cerebral fighter. And it almost felt like, like when you're playing UFC on Xbox or something.
My favorite.
And the coaches are like, they were like the
control. He was
he was like their little guy, and they're controlling him. And so it felt like in every move like I went to is like they knew what I was doing, which I hadn't had happen before. Like everybody knows a triangle, it's coming. But even my top game, I got past his guard, and it was a choke I was working on that not a lot of people even use nowadays, and they were calling it out. And I'm like, man, what the hell? Like they got a spy or something? Because every move I made, he was like, his coaches were right there in his ear telling him what was going on. So it was a tough fight, and obviously Drew hits hard and could take a punch. So.
Very cool. Yeah, so that stood out to me. But let's kind of bring it back. How did you get into fighting? Were you athletic in other sports at first, or did you go right into fighting? How did that kind of how did that start for you?
So I, just in high school and stuff, played basketball, ran track, and that kind of stuff. And I want to say I was great. I'm from a 1A school, so as long as you're halfway athletic, you're going to start at that stuff. And so once I got done with high school, I got in a little bit of trouble, and the only real offers I had to do anything athletic-wise was track, and I was not in the right space to be doing that kind of stuff, devoted my life to track. And so my buddies and I, we'd always actually a buddy I'm getting ready to go hang out with this weekend. I haven't seen him in like 15 years, but we used to watch the fights at his house and do Ju Jitsu moves on each other and boxing matches before school and after school. And then when I turned like 18, I started doing Ju Jitsu, and it was just a real natural fit, and went from there.
So can we say where you went to high school?
Yeah, I went to Martinsdale St. Mary's, so it's just south of town here, south of West Des Moines by about 15 minutes. It's kind of a weird situation. It's only 15 minutes away, but back then, I haven't been there for a while, but back then it was like going back in time, So it's like you've got the biggest school in the state, in West Des Moines. At that time, I don't know if it still is or not, but then you go 15 minutes south and you got a little 1A school that's got
Iowa, huh?
Graduating class of 35. It's like we moved from West Des Moines down there, and I just remember being like, it's like going back in time. It was crazy, but no, it was cool because again, you get to play all those sports, and I think I transitioned to MMA and made a big splash. I fought within the UFC. I was like 3 or 4 years into my pro career, which is kind of unheard of. And it was because I brought a lot of that athletic background and the athletic training to MMA. Back then, it was mainly the only training people were doing was just going in there and trying to knock the hell out of each other, and that was a training. And so I took a different approach with a lot of strength training and a lot of studying and videos and stuff like that, which again, not a lot of people were doing back then. Now everybody does it, drillers and stuff.
Yeah.
But back then it wasn't like that.
Let me ask you this: since you made it to such a high level, did you ever deal with any pushback being from Iowa Did they ever kind of say, "Oh, what's there in Iowa?" Or did the wrestling background here kind of give us some
Yeah, so like
some credibility?
back then, it was kind of on the tail end of Militich, you know. So Militich at the time was the best gym in the
Big
world,
deal.
you know. So like
That-
Iowa, if anything
thank
else,
you.
it was more like a badge of honor. But no, so but I will say when I got to the UFC, so again, it was kind of towards the tail end of Militich, and everybody's kind of branching out and doing their own thing. And when I got to the scene, um, it was tough, right? So like my
Yes.
first fight's Cole Miller, who I'm fighting out of American Top Team. Back when American Top Team had
Wow.
transitioned to like the best team around, you know. And he's a black belt. He's training with black belts, and you know, here I am training in Des Moines, Iowa, with you know, not the same level of coaching, not obviously not the same sparring partners. So being from Iowa, especially now, I just can't imagine these up and coming fighters, and I'm guessing that's probably why we don't see as many local fighters transition into the big stage right now, is because we just don't have the coaches and we don't have the training partners. Back then, you could kind of get away with it, you know, if you did the
Yes,
right
sir.
kind of training and focused on yourself. But the local fighters have a real uphill battle with what we have going on here. Well, not what we have going on here. There's good things, but what other states and other cities have going on, it's just hard to compete with.
So how about like the beginning of your career? Can we walk through like your first fight?
Yeah. So I've been doing jiu-jitsu for a while. I think I was like 18, maybe 19. Just, you know, back then, again, you could show up at, I think you did it too, Rob. You could show up at bars and fight and stuff. This was a little bit different.
Uncle Bucks.
Yeah.
Shout out to Uncle Buck.
Yeah. So my neighbor, he'd been doing some amateur fights, and he couldn't fight, and he said, you know, it's in Boone or somewhere up there, and he's like, "You want to go fill in for me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, you know." And so I've like I trained some jiu-jitsu, and I've done some boxing. Obviously, I've fought, not got paid to do it, but done plenty of fighting.
Did you win your first fight?
Yeah, so I think that was maybe one of my last knockouts. All my pro wins there by submission, and then I went in there, and dude, it was so funny. Hometown favorite. Again, 18, 19-year-old, curly-haired kid, skinny dude, and they put me in there with like this grown-ass man with like face tats and neck tats. And
Scary.
bald, and everybody's going crazy for him. And I went in there, and again, it's just like it's a different sport. I started training like an athlete, and a lot of these guys were just brawlers. I went in there, I hit him with a leg kick, and right away his eyes got big. He kind of froze up, and then I just clinched him up and kneed him in the face a bunch of times. And within like 30 seconds, I looked at the ref, and I'm like punching him in the face. I'm like, you got to stop this. And he's like, "Oh yeah, this is done." I'm like, wow, like, and then obviously after that you get hooked.
So what point in your career where, you know, maybe in the middle of a fight or something, where you're like, dude, this is an actual fight. Like, this guy's trained. I got to basically knock his head off to win.
So, you know, I never really had that. And I had somebody ask me this question the other day, too. Well, they were talking about how they get scared before fights. And I always got nervous. It was never like scared because I train 6 days a week, 4 hours, 5 hours a day, nonstop. I eat, sleep, and breathe it. I would cut in weight, watching videos. I mean, my whole life was MMA. And so when I was fighting, I always, and some people just have it in them. When I fight, like I'm a fighter at heart. So if I get hit, I hit back, you know? So never once was I like, oh man, this is a fight. But when I fought Jacob Volkman, he was a former UFC guy. I think he won like 6 fights in the UFC, went like 6-4, All-American wrestler from Minnesota. But I got in there, and I had gone up a little bit on the weight class, and he did too. But he started tossing me around, and then he hit me with some ground and pound right out the front, right on the nose. And I was like, holy shit, this is a fight. You know, like,
Yeah.
I'm like, man, that's a different kind of strength. That's a different kind of athlete. And luckily, I choked him out shortly after that. But it was scary there for a second because I was like, this is a different breed of person, dude. It's some dude that's been wrestling, you know, 30-something years old and been wrestling since he's 5 years old. I mean, that's a different kind of strength.
How about like behind the scenes stuff? Like, what have you called that you made it to the UFC? I mean, what were you doing? Is it like something where you get a phone call?
Yeah.
Hey, TJ, you made it, man.
Yeah, it's kind of like exactly like you would think. But like right before that, so I went on the Ultimate Fight. Well, one of the coolest experiences was I went down to the Ultimate Fight, or went through the Ultimate Fighter process, right? And so back then it was again different than it is now. I think a majority of the guys get on because of their agents and mailing in videos and stuff like that. Back then there was actually a physical tryout where you could go. There was a show in Charlotte, and I went down there with a couple buddies from here.
Around what time was this? So the people kind of
shoot, man, I'm bad at date. I would say like 09 maybe.
Who'd you go down
09.
with?
Yeah. I went down with Jake Priola and Jeff Carsons.
Okay.
And we went down there again, a kind of ragtag group. We just like had started training together, and we went down there and first UFC event too. We got to see Big Country knock out Stefan Struve. So whenever that
Wow.
was, yeah, it was cool. But
Wow.
the day before they had tryouts, and so you go in there and you first round is I think it was first round is hitting pads, and so like there's Dana White and all the producers from the UFC, and they're checking you out and stuff, you know, and then. If you make it through their hidden rounds, you know, they've got pros there to hold pads for you. If you make it through that, there was like over 400 people there to try out.
Wow.
Just for my weight class, you know. And so, but I was looking around, I'm like, they always take at least one tall 155er, you know, for the house. And then I'm like, and I'm also just good entertainment, you know, you get me locked in a house, it would be crazy. But so I was pretty confident, but we hit pads. I made it to that round, went to jiu-jitsu, made it to the next round, you know, so they whittle it down to like 100. And then after that, you come back later that night, and then you do an interview with Dana White, and the production team for Spike at the time was who was producing The Ultimate Fighter, and so we did a interview with them. That went good. Again, I'm pretty comfortable in front of people and interviews and stuff like that, and so we went to. And then you just kind of wait for that call, you know, like you were saying, you wait for the call, and then 2 weeks later, I got the call, hey, you go to Vegas, and you're going to go through another round of interviews, you know, and that's where they do like testing and you know, physical testing too, like CAT scans and stuff like that.
You knew you
and
made
then,
it once they called you.
Well, we don't know yet then, because this is still, you get there, and then now it's down to like 50, and they only take like 24 or whatever it was. Back then, you had to fight to get in the house. You don't have to fight to get in the house anymore. But back then, you had to fight to get in the house. And so, anyways, and it was a lightweight season with St. Pierre and Koscheck and stuff. And anyway, so then I was like, okay, man, you know, I got a chance. Like, I could really do this. And then I went back home for another 2 weeks, and then they call you, and I can't remember exactly the moment I got that call, but I do remember the moment I got a call for the UFC, because I saw somebody had dropped out of a fight.
It was for 123, is that correct?
Yeah, and I saw somebody had dropped out to fight.
Fighting on a numbered UFC is pretty,
yeah,
pretty
it was
awesome.
sweet, man, because back then too, I mean, yeah, that was just wild. At the Palace in Detroit, you know.
Oh, amazing,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, like, and we're in the locker room, and the jerseys are all behind us and stuff. It's
That's
like
cool.
the real deal, you know. And we get the, so the Ultimate Fighter, I don't really remember getting that call, but that was crazy experience. But yeah, I was like, after I lost on the Ultimate Fighter, I got knocked out in like 15 seconds. Like one of the worst down, like that's fighting, man. It's like you're either top of the mountain or
happens.
bottom
It's a
of
fight.
So,
the barrel.
Can you talk about after that and picking
Yeah.
yourself back up?
Yeah, so like, dude, I was like, just man, you're always your biggest critic, you know. And
Yes, sir.
I just had in my mind, I'm like, if this Ultimate Fighter doesn't work, then I'm out, you know, like I'm not gonna make it. And so I
The mic?
I was
Sorry,
like,
the volume on it kind of spiked for some reason. Test.
Yeah, it's definitely not spiking, but
yeah,
Okay.
but
sound testing before.
yeah, but so I where were we going over here?
My bad.
You're good.
Oh, you good?
So the Ultimate
yeah.
Fighter.
Yeah, the Ultimate Fighter. Bouncing back from that. So like I went out there with the idea. I'm like, if it doesn't work out, then I'm just hanging this MMA thing up. You know, this is your one shot to get. You know, and then I lost so miserably. I was like, okay, they'll never have me back. And I'm like, when I get home, I got to get a real job. You know, I was only like 23 or something at the time, so it's not like it's the end of the world. But in your eyes, it is. You know.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, I got to get a real job then. And so, I mean, I remember just getting off the plane. My parents were there to pick me up because they had financed this whole thing. You know, they were the ones that taking care of me. And you know, fighting pays money, but like especially back then, it wasn't
When you're
much.
trying to get in the door. At least.
Yeah. And so you lose on that, and you feel like you let them down, your training partners down, your whole city down. You know, and I just remember going down that escalator at Des Moines International and just looking at them, just crying. You know, like I can't believe I'm here, and because you know then they know you're home, because that means you didn't make it into the house, and so I was just crying, and I was like done with MMA. Like I've just given way too much of my life to this. I'm never gonna make the UFC. I got beat on the Ultimate Fighter, and I'm like, I got to get a real job. And then like shortly after that, a buddy like offered me a job, and I went with that, and then an opportunity came up in Omaha again it wasn't for Victory, it was for another, but it was in Omaha, and I was like, well, the guy had beat the crap out of my one of my best friends and training partners, Alex Harper, and it's Dakota Cochran. He's a pretty big name nowadays. He fights for BKFC. He's beat slew of
Love
UFC vets. Yeah,
BKFC.
yeah.
Love it.
And
Yeah.
and so it was a chance to go fight him, up and coming kid, 5-0, and I'm like, oh, I beat up my buddy, put him in the hospital, like I'm gonna go kick the shit out of this guy, and I did. I beat him in like a minute and a half, and I was
Oh,
like,
you
okay,
avenged your friend, huh?
Beat his ass,
yeah,
huh?
yeah. And I
What'd
was
you
like,
do? Choke him out?
yeah, yeah. Well, I ended up taking his back and punching him. Like it was a brutal uppercut from the back, and just cracked him in his nose, and he came up here, and I slid under and got him. But it was a great feeling. Again, I had no intentions on ever trying to fight again or make it back to the UFC. I mean, I had trained for that fight, but solely for that fight. And then Midwest Cage Championships approached me with another opportunity, and that was to fight Josh Henry, their 145-pound champ. And at the time, I was still technically the 155-pound champ. So we did this meet in the middle kind of thing at 150, and I just buzzsaw through him. And
He's so active too.
yeah, good for him, man.
He's
Yeah,
I think he
yeah.
owns a gym.
Yeah, he's got a gym, and it's in his blood. His family's rest in peace to his dad, but and his brother. But they're a close martial arts family, and he's just carrying on the tradition. So a little bit different scenario than mine. It's in his blood, and for me, it's not like that. So, but good for him, man. More power to him. But yeah. So then after I beat Josh, then I was like, that I saw that somebody had fallen off that UFC 123 card to lightweight, and I was at that point in my career where anytime somebody fell off, it's like, okay, here's a chance, and that's the only way you could get into the UFC back then. There wasn't a Dana White contender series, or there wasn't any of that.
Looking
shit.
for a fight, all that stuff.
No, it was like 2 weeks notice. You're lucky, and that's what I got was 2 weeks notice. But it was coming off a fight, and I went out to UFC 123 and put on a good show and got a fight in front of my hero at the time, BJ Penn, and
Legendary.
Where were you when you got the call?
So I was at work with that guy that gave me the job, and his name's John Halverson, and he co-owned Midwest Cage Championship with Ryan
Moved to
Haas.
Cali and stuff.
Yeah, and Ryan was managing me at the time, so obviously they were going back and forth. But I remember I was working, and John's like, "Hey, I got to tell you something." And I looked at him right away. I go, "I made the UFC, didn't I?" He's like, "Just come in here. I got to tell you something." He didn't want to do it in front of everybody. He's like, "You're going to Detroit. You're fighting Paul Kelly," and I'm like, "Sweet," because good matchup too, and. But yeah, I'll always remember that. I don't know why I can't remember when I got the news for Ultimate Fighter, because that was such a long process. You would think I would have remembered. I mean, that was like a 6-month process to get accepted. So I would have thought I never thought about that.
When you got the call, did you call your parents and hey, I made it?
Yeah,
I
and then
made it.
shortly after that, MMA Junkie ran an article, so like it was like I find out, and then press already knows, and so there was an article within that most people knew before. It at least fans, they're like, oh, hitting up my wall, like, oh, we saw the article, I'm like, I haven't even told everybody yet. But
Yeah.
So tell me about the walkout. How were you feeling on that first walkout in the UFC? You're fighting on a numbered event.
yeah,
A big
So,
deal.
Sorry, but can we start from like the second they pick you up from like the hotel or your travel
that's
there
actually
then to the walkout?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty cool story. So I'm going to go further back. So like they fly you out, right? And my buddy Alex Harper was my corner again, my number one training partner at the time. But we used to fight people all the time, like when we were younger and stuff, And in small towns, you don't fight like people in your town. You just drive to other towns and fight each other, And I'll never forget him looking at me and going, "Dude, this is just wild. Like we used to drive, half an hour to go fight somebody, and they're flying somebody across the world because Paul Kelly's from England, and he's like, they're flying a dude across the world." To fight you. It is like,
That's
like
amazing.
that was like, this is your buddy that you've been friends with since like 14 and you've come up together in the MMA scene, and it's like looking at each other like, holy shit, like we did it, And so then you get off the plane, and this is what's funny is we were late to get in, whatever flight timing, and the only other person getting in the time is Rampage at the time. And so, because he's on the card. And so normally they pick you up with like a van or something, but Rampage gets that VIP treatment, and I'm the only other one there. So we get a ride in his like limo bus, and again, here's my buddy and I who've been watching Pride, since we were like 12 years old, and we're Rampage is
cool.
like from me to you, and his whole entourage, and they've got like, it's so funny because they've got like bags and bags. I'm like, well, no wonder they brought that limo bus for these guys, and here's me and Harper with just like little tiny backpacks full of shit and maybe like a suitcase, like it's like just completely not prepared for what we're getting into. But luckily when we got there, then as soon as you get there, the UFC, like every time you get to the UFC, you go into a room and they've got like all this merch and stuff for you, and you just go like, they're like, okay, take one of each thing, and then
Costco,
you just go through, you get bags and shirts and sweats and, you know, everything. And then by the time you're done, you're like, well, shit, my suitcases ain't big enough to carry all this stuff, you know? And then another cool part was like, it was the minute we get back to the hotel, I don't know if they still do this, but fans would just wait, like collectors. And so there'd be like 50 people there asking you for your autograph, you know? And I've signed some autographs, but nothing like this, you know? I'm like, I don't know how they did it, but they already got pictures of me, you know? Some no-name Tj Obrian, and they're all like, can you sign this? Can you sign this? I'm like, holy shit. Again, it was like looking at each
Very
other like,
cool.
we made it, you know? Or like you go to leave and there's like kids chasing you down to get autographs and stuff, you know? And it's like, it was wild. But yeah, the walkout.
What song did you walk out to? Do you remember?
Yeah, I always walk out to the same thing. Dropkick Murphys, Shipping Up to Boston. I've been doing that since, I don't even know. Probably like my third fight or fourth fight. Or
I
something.
assume it noticeably felt bigger.
Yeah, especially
Than
at the
your
Palace.
previous fights?
Yeah, especially at the Palace. It was huge. And again, the cool things in the locker room, like I said, like here's where the Detroit Pistons are sitting. And then, so before every fight, at least back then, the UFC used to have, they didn't have set bonuses, right? So like now it's 50 G's, which is bullshit, honestly. Like that they're paying less.
We can absolutely get into fighter pay.
Yeah, great. Don't get me started there. But the bonuses are less now than they were when I was in the UFC.
And
that's 10 plus years ago. Like, how ridiculous is
But
that?
it was still a fight and a win. Is that how they did it back then too?
Yeah. Still, again, not a fan of that structure, but yeah, it's a win. Win show structure is what it's called.
'Cause they still do that.
A majority of
Well,
fighters.
yeah, minus the
majority of fighters.
top 15
yeah,
guys.
some people negotiate are good enough to do like a set pay, but the bonus structure back then. So it was me. So like again, just wild timing. But here's Matt Hughes sitting right here, BJ Penn right
Legendary.
here. You know, Machida's in there. And so it used to be Dana wouldn't allow anybody else in the locker room besides fighter. It was a fighter meeting. No agents, no corners, no anybody besides fighters. So literally the only 24 people on the card. And again, like I'm sitting next to my hero, Matt Hughes right here, and Dana White starts off with like 60K or something, and and BJ starts giving him shit. He's like, "This is our third fight, you know, like you got to get more than that." And he talked him up to like 85K for back then it was submission of the night, knockout of the night, and then 2 fights of the night. But think about that, 85K back then in 2010, where the UFC wasn't
Wow, I didn't know that.
anywhere near what they are now. And this is just UFC 123 is now like a special event, you know, and it was 85K. And now those guys are still getting 50K.
50, yeah.
It's just wild. It just pisses me off.
What was the main event of that fight?
Rampage versus Machida.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, some big names on there, which were guys that me and my buddy have been watching since we were junior high, you know. So
Yeah.
it was pretty cool.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
The production and everything for it, is it so you're in the locker room and they come call your name, it's like, hey, it's fight time, TJ.
Yeah, and so I don't think a lot of people realize like how much shit you have to do. So you go out on, at least again, this is speaking back then, I think this is still accurate, but like if you fight on a Saturday, you go out on a Tuesday because they've got stuff for you to do. You got media to do.
Fight week.
Yeah, the minute you get there, you got to sign the posters. The next day, you've got to do like a photo shoot. Like so, they constantly keep you busy. But when you're in the locker room, that's another cool thing is you get to watch the other fights happening. But then it does kind of give you like some nervous energy because like the fights around here, you're in the back. You can go up to the front or whatever. But when you're watching that broadcast, I don't know. There's something about it that gets you pretty pumped up.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your thoughts on cutting weight.
Yeah.
So is that something that you had to deal with?
Yeah.
Obviously, every fighter cuts weight, but was it a struggle?
Yeah.
Do you get that call for the UFC?
Yeah.
Are you in a good place to make weight, or
At that time again, dude, I'm training like nonstop. So you stay ready. Like,
so you kind of walked around fight weight?
Well, I'm like 170, you know, and
Gotcha.
at that point, I had just fought at that 150 mark, and that was 2 weeks. So I was like small. Like Paul Kelly, I saw him, I was just like, holy shit, that's a huge dude. And Edson Barboza made his debut that day too.
Edson Barboza is an amazing fighter.
Yeah, and I remember looking at him
No, I think
and
Siggy's-
being like, how the hell does this guy make weight? And that week,
He looks like he's chiseled out of stone.
I know. And that week, like every time I'd go to the weight room or go somewhere, he was down there on a treadmill or elliptical cutting weight, like just nonstop, just to get down to 155. And here I am, like at that time I was like 165. Like it wasn't big, but I always stayed around like 170. Everybody always asked how I made weight as a lightweight. I'm like, because I'm always just at weight, like 170. I really should have probably been at 145, and I did go down to 45 a couple times, but 155 was just a real easy cut for me, so it wasn't too bad. I just didn't know how to cut back then. Like I didn't understand calories or sodium. Mainly, I didn't understand sodium. So like a night before a fight, for example, I'd be like, or the day before, I'd be like, starve myself all day and then go get Buffalo Wild Wings because I'm like, okay, I can eat 1,000 calories, you know. So I'd go eat like a bunch of chicken wings the night before weigh-ins. Like, not until like the very last fight of my career did I figure out the water flushing or whatever that's called, water loading, and the sugars and the sodium. And I did a hot tub or a hot bath weight cut instead of sitting my head in a sauna. And like, dude, I spent so much time in the sauna, I feel like my brain was microwaved, you know? And so when I got to actually figuring out what I was supposed to do, which was way too late in my career, the process was way easier, you know?
Did they have a PI back then? Sorry.
No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
They didn't start that here till, I think it was like 5 years
So
ago.
somebody like you thinks these fighters got it good, huh? They got a chef down
Can
there.
you imagine?
They
Well,
got
and
everything.
Trainers.
Yeah.
Dude, trainers, like.
Physical therapists.
Yeah, and like, I just can't imagine the fighter I could have been with being able to
That
go
kind of
there and
support.
utilize that kind of stuff. Or like, Vegas isn't super expensive either. You know, like if you rent a condo with a couple guys, you maybe $1,000 a month, you know, maybe even less than that, you know, and then if you can train for free.
And your food,
you
they
can
got
train
food?
for free.
They
Yeah,
have
and
meals?
food, like, dude, nutritionists, weightlifting, like just on gym memberships alone, and local fighters here are probably spending $200 to $300 a month on that alone. Can you imagine, like, and then that's for, like, again, not to shit on anybody, but like the quality compared to the UFC Institute compared to the gyms that we have here, like they're getting that for free. As far as I know, I think that's how it works.
That's my understanding as
Yeah,
well.
I've been curious about that because I see a lot of guys that are non-UFC trainer or fighters training there, and other athletes and stuff. So I'm just kind of wondering how
I think you
that
can just
Through gym
sign up
connections,
and go
maybe, or
yeah,
something?
I would
Yeah.
assume, but you would think they'd have some sort of membership, like, or day pass or something. But
Yeah.
I don't know how that works. But good for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you guys seen how much weight Patty to Batty cuts?
I was going to mention him when he talked about the
crazy.
wings.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
When
crazy.
he said
I
eating
mean,
the wings, I was going to say like Patty.
if
How old
he-
is Patty? Do you guys know?
I
He's
think
in his
he's
20s.
like-
I do know that. Late
Okay.
20s.
Okay.
But I mean, it's insane. He's
I
he
just saw
gains
it.
a lot of weight and he
So-
cuts it brutal weight
Yeah.
cut.
You're still into the sport? You still follow?
Yeah, I do. I do. Not like I used to, obviously, but I watch fights every weekend. You know?
So I got to know. I'm curious. Have you ever found yourself out in a social setting where maybe a guy is being a little ridiculous, and in your mind you're like, I could probably just choke this guy in 8 seconds?
Yeah,
Do you ever find yourself in? Because
all the time. No.
yeah, I was curious. I was curious.
He's looking at us right now.
No,
like,
yeah, I'll choke both you.
no. That is something I was thinking about the other day, though. Like, I don't have this anymore, but it used to be like, well, I guess it's still, but not to the same degree. But it's like anywhere you go, it's like, I wonder if I could kick that guy's ass, you know, like, or I
Well,
I
as a
could kick that
fighter,
guy's-
probably
yeah.
for sure, right?
Yeah, but with my big gnarly ears, like I usually, and now I'm bigger, so like I walk around about 210, and I work out about 5-6 days a week. So it's not. I mean, I'm obviously carrying some extra luggage compared to what I used to, but I'm not a 170-pound skinny guy walking around. When I was that weight, believe it or not, when I was more deadly, like that's when I would get more shit from people.
To be able to
Yeah.
say more deadly is so crazy.
Yeah,
It's so cool, man.
But now I don't know. It's because of my size or what, or they just feel bad for me because of my gray hair. But nobody really messes with me anymore.
Do you still get people in public like, "Hey, are you TJ? Are you?"
Yeah, for sure. But I also get like sometimes people just don't understand like the sport, and so like they think like the other day there was this dude at the bar that's like 50-something years old telling me he's never got knocked out and blah blah blah, and I'm like, well, that's because you've never fought anybody that knows how to fight.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd get knocked out. I'm like, the best guys in the world get knocked out, and it's not because
Shout out to Justin Gaethje.
yeah, right, dude. And he's got an iron chin. I'm like, I find it hard to believe that you've just got this ability to not get knocked out. I'm like, it's because you probably never fought anybody that knows how to fight.
everyone
Of
can
course,
get
that
knocked
led
out.
to him wanting or saying he wants to box. I'm like, hell, you know, funny story. Like, I've got 2 pairs of gloves in my car. Like, we can do this right now, but let's do it on the grass so when I knock you out, you don't hit your head on the cement. That's usually like a good end. Like, once you tell somebody that, like, no matter how tough they are, or think they are, when you say that, break that down to them like, hey, we've got no problem fighting you, but we need to go in the grass because when I knock you out, I don't want your head bouncing off the cement and me going to prison for life. And they're like, oh, okay. Yeah, well, I didn't really want to fight anyways. Like they change their tone real quick when they know that you're contemplating that far and ahead of kicking the shit out of them.
It sounds kind of scary.
Yeah, kicking
I
the
have
shit
a
out.
particular set of skills.
And you say it all calm.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like
Like
Liam
it's
Neeson in
nothing.
Taken.
Yeah.
That's what it
Yeah.
reminds me
Yeah.
of.
Like it's let me finish my beer
Yeah,
first,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then we will.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
Do you have any potential bar fight stories or one kind of where you had to check a guy, or have you been able to kind of maintain
no, I do have a
We're
funny,
not promoting violence by
yeah,
any means.
I do have a funny story, and this was back like when I was training a lot. I think I was just starting to fight, but here's a really good test of like if you ever get if you're an MMA fighter, like word of advice, don't like be punching people in the face.
Of course.
Be the first guy to hit. But like I was at Iowa State one time, and this dude at the
Early
tailgate.
20s. It's probably in your early 20s.
Yeah, for sure. And at the tailgate, he went to go square up with me, and I threw. He was talking all this shit. I'm like, let's go, and he's like, okay, let's go. I threw one leg kick, and he goes, cops, cops, and I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm like, he set me up. Like, so imagine if you would have hit him. But usually you throw, if you're an MMA guy, that word advice, just throw that one leg kick,
Clean
and then
leg
you're
kick,
gonna
too.
know if that dude's really about it, because usually that shit will make somebody change their tune real quick.
And you've mentioned leg kicks twice in this interview.
Yeah.
So they're kind of taking over a little bit, huh? Over the last 10 years, because
Yeah, well,
leg
lately
kicks have
that's
became a big deal.
that calf kick, right?
Yeah.
I personally haven't been kicked by a calf kick, and I don't want to, but I understand the why it works, and I've watched really high level fighters just succumm to it. So
And older, that's what I was gonna. I don't want to sit like I'm gonna use Anthony Smith as an
Yeah.
example because it's pretty known that
Yeah.
he struggles with that because
Yeah.
he comes from that era.
Yeah.
Because he's been fighting for so long where he didn't have to deal with it.
No.
Now he's like, I don't even know what to do.
yeah, I think like you just get out of the way. I guess I don't know. Like I really
Pick up
don't-
your leg,
yeah,
kinda?
Well, that's what they want. Like they want you to lift up. That's why they get it is because you go to check it. The traditional check. You
Kinda
lift
turn
it
your
up,
shin out a little
and
bit.
and then they wrap it around. So that's what they want. But you also don't want to go into it. I mean, I think it's just one of those things you got to keep your distance. But that's what's kind of changed the game now, right? So you're
Yes, sir.
seeing now. I say that in like we just saw Bilal, Maul, what's his name, Leon
Leon,
Edwards,
yeah.
and Rob Maul O'Malley. But prior to that, striking was kind of making a comeback because everybody's figured out takedown defense, and then also I think that calf kick has caused the distance to change a lot. It used to be like we could stand in front of each other a little bit more because you could check that kick. But now people, it's like, dude, you eat 3 of those. That's a game changer.
Yeah, Alex Pereira is a perfect example of that.
I love watching him kick people.
Yeah, yeah. And before Gaethje was known for his kicks too, and then it
Yeah.
had opened up his hands.
So after I got cut from the UFC, I signed with World Series of Fighting. Can't remember when that was. If that was like directly after it or not. But World Series of Fighting is now PFL, but Gaethje had signed to World Series of Fighting. And I was on the first World Series of Fighting. And he
Oh,
was-
really?
Yeah, and he was
Wow,
and he was
that's
on,
very cool.
And he was on the second, and I remember like them like throwing that fight out there, and I was like, oh hell no! Like
You dodged a bullet,
I
maybe?
don't wanna, dodged a broken leg probably because at that time, dude, he was just that was his thing. He was stopping everybody in World Series of Fighting with
Chopped him down.
leg kicks, like literally stopping them with leg kicks. And I'm a 6'2" dude. What do you think he's gonna do? He's gonna definitely try to chop me down. So
I think Steve Carl from Des Moines
He was
had
on that
the
card.
belt. Yeah,
It-
well, he ended up having the belt for a little bit.
yeah, and so did Rick Glenn.
Oh yeah,
Rick
yep,
Glenn
yep.
won the
And he
45.
just fought
Yep.
recently.
Yep. And Rick's opening a new jiu-jitsu gym in Marshalltown, I believe.
Oh, I heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Rick's
Vicar
got
told me.
Rick's
that.
got sick jiu-jitsu.
So we got to know who, no order, but who are your 3 or 5 current favorite fighters to watch?
And you don't have to mention my name.
Yeah.
Even though he's got a fight coming up.
That's a good question. Well, Alex Pereira.
Yep.
Love Gaethje. Now you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah, no right or wrong.
I like Sandhagen.
So already I can see a lot of striking.
Yeah.
So as somebody who's choked out a lot of guys,
Yeah.
you kind of have an affinity for guys who can kind of.
Yeah, and so that's
Because-
the funny thing is everybody's like, oh, you just must be a grappler, and I think anybody that's trained with me can attest that I'm not just a grappler. I'm 6'2", but I also have a 78-inch wingspan. So like, this is supposed to be how tall you are. If that was the case, I'd be 6'6", right? And the guys I'm fighting, majority of the time are 5'10" or under. So there's a reason I end up on my back. It's because I start striking with them. I start with those leg kicks. I start with the jabs, and they're getting hit from all the way out here. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to take them down. So I love striking. That's probably what I've kept up on most since retiring is I strike more consistently at least and do. I try not to get hit in the head anymore, but I do a lot of drilling, a lot of pad work, a lot of bag work, a lot of jump rope, stuff like that. And so I stay more consistent with the striking. So yes, I love striking. I think don't we all though?
Absolutely.
I think so.
Absolutely.
I think every grappler is going to say they like striking, but
Your
the tough thing,
jits,
the tough thing about jiu-jitsu now in MMA is it's just tough to do, you know?
it's tough.
Yeah.
So we trained probably about a year or so ago at Des Moines Jiu Jitsu,
Yeah.
I think. And
Yeah.
I popped in for a second, and we were talking about how much the game has changed. People were throwing like heel hooks and stuff. I remember maybe 5-10 years ago, someone would put you in a heel hook. You'd just roll out of it, or
Yeah.
you'd say, "Dude," you'd sit there and laugh. It'd
Or
be,
punch him in the face.
Yeah, you'd sit there and rest
Yeah.
for 30 seconds while they try and put
Yeah.
you in one. Now it's like instantly, and people tap. I mean, what do you think about jits? Like that always changes because small things like breaking guard, people started using their elbow, then they went to using their hand.
Yeah. So this is going to be like, I'm going to say something and it's going to make a lot of jiu-jitsu guys mad, but I feel like heel hooks have kind of ruined jiu-jitsu. Now, why I say that is it just made it so, especially on the local scene, there just isn't much scrambling, right? Like I like position wise, I like maintaining position. I like going for submissions, but with heel hooks, there's just no room for error. And so it makes it so, at least when I'm rolling locally, it just seems like everybody's either back is stuck to the mat or they're up. There's no like scrambling. And that's why I love jujitsu, or that's the style of jujitsu I love is scrambles, like catching guys when we're moving around and still dominating positions and stuff like that. And so it's really changed the game. Now it has also brought a different type of jiu-jitsu player into the world because it used to be, I was talking about this with my buddy Doug Owens, who's been doing jiu-jitsu for like 30 years, and he's in the same boat as me, so maybe a biased opinion, but it's made it so people can't scramble, and it's just tough. It's just tough. But and when I first came back to jiu-jitsu, so I've had 4 knee surgeries, I had 3 at the time, and then I came back to jiu-jitsu. I had 2 before I retired, then came back, did some jiu-jitsu, toured again, came back, signed up for a competition, and I'm like, everybody's heel hooking people. I'm like, I gotta learn how to not get heel hooked, right? Like that's what you would think is like, okay, I just need to work on my heel hook defense. No. So like my first tournament back, I got like heel hook 3 times, I think, and just working on the defense didn't do it. You have to actually learn how to do heel hooks before you can stop them, and even just having the ability to threaten somebody when they're getting in these leg entanglements slows down the heel hook. But man, just not a big fan of them. It just doesn't match up good with my style either, though. So, biased opinion. Like these long legs, who doesn't want to grab a hold of those things
someone's
and
gonna
twist
try and
them?
heel hook it.
Especially like if I'm working a high guard, like they drop back. Like there's a video online of me getting my knee just absolutely shredded by Jay-Z Calvacante in that World Series of Fighting. He catches me in sort of a heel hook thing and just shreds my knee. But again, it's because I got these long legs. I put them where they don't belong. But no, man, those things are scary.
So let me ask you this. Are there some things that you learned as you were training for fighting, being a professional fighter, that you've been able to continue to apply to your life in general, kind of as you've went through retirement and
That's
in
a
this
great
stage of your
question.
life?
That's a great question. So, like, one of the biggest things I notice about myself is when in those small battles, right? So, like, every day, I was so disciplined. Like, wake up at the same time every day, eat the same thing every day, do it like just this crazy routine, no straying away from that because this is my goal and that's where I want to get to. And it makes after the UFC, I'm working 40 hours a week and still training 4 hours a day or 3 hours a day. So like those are long ass days, and I had a family and everything, and so it was tough, but it made me so mentally tough. And so like sometimes now, especially I have to look back on it and be like, I've noticed that when I'm more consistent at the jiu-jitsu gym, so again, it's tough right now. I've got a son that's 12 years old, sports 4 days a week. games on the weekends or meets on the weekend. So it's tough to get it in. I'm only in, once or twice a week, at least doing some sort of martial art. I still, lift and do other stuff, cardio a lot. But just losing those little battles, I find myself doing it more now. Like, I'll just like today, for example, I'm coming over here. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go there, and then I gotta go stop by buddies real quick, and then I'm gonna go hit the gym. I'm like, TJ, you're not gonna do that. You're not gonna go hit the gym. You're gonna be like, all right, I'll just hit it in the morning. And the old me would never do that. But like, that's what I think is great about martial arts and just having a goal in general and winning those little battles, which I need to do better of right now. But yeah, that's the biggest takeaway is like, that's a tough life to live when you're doing it. And so it makes everything else seem a lot easier.
Do you miss competing?
I do. It's kind of weird. Like, I've been super competitive my whole life, and I felt my competitive nature kind of dying off. But I'm in my job does have a competitive outlet to it to a degree, and so that allows me to be competitive.
Are you competitive at work with the guys?
Oh, yeah.
Or with the people you work with?
Oh, yeah. Like, and I mean, things have changed in my industry, and so, like, people.
What is it do you do, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm a loan officer.
Gotcha.
The other people aren't as competitive as me, but I could still be competitive without having to rub it in their face. I look at the numbers every day and I figure where everybody's at, and yeah, I stay competitive in a different way, and also with my son. I was
gonna ask that. Are you competitive at home as well?
Yeah, and
video games or soccer or anything?
Yeah. My son and I lately have really got into UFC, so we're every night he's kicking the crap out of me on Xbox UFC. But
so he knows you were a fighter. Has he watched your fights? Is he?
Yeah, and he's really kind of getting into it now because like that old "my dad could beat up your dad" kind of story.
Well, he means it.
Yeah, so now he can like.
It's for real.
Yeah, like he can say like there's no debate now.
I would tell my daughter, "You go apologize to that boy."
yeah. There's
we actually want to have some like UFC like video game stuff here, like reactions and stuff.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. Bring your son. And you two
he would love it. When
out.
I told him I was coming, and he was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He was pretty like young kids like that kind of shit.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and he kind of missed out on like he didn't get to see me fight or anything. And a couple of years ago, I was gonna fight, and then tore my knee again. But he
who were you gonna fight again?
Jeremiah Deaver.
Oh yeah.
And he was gonna. He got to go watch me square off and stuff. He's getting all pumped. And for a while, I was doing some judging, or no, not judging, commentating for MMA. And so he got to come along with those, and he liked all that thing. But I just keep telling him, man, like, you're not allowed to fight. And so it's kind of Debbie Downer. He's wrestled since he's like 4 years old. He's 12 now.
That's Iowa.
He's a big kid, and he's aggressive. Or he's not aggressive. He's disciplined, and he's gonna make a lot more money doing something else than fighting. At least that's the goal, right? You always want your kids to do better than you. And
so is that something you suggest? Maybe have a plan B if you're gonna make it to the UFC, just in case, or do you wish you would have done things different?
Well, so there's a couple things I wish I would have done different, but I think, and I don't want to like speak to where other people are at in their lives, but I feel like I ended up maybe more successful than some guys, because I continued to build my professional resume at the same time I was building my MMA resume. So like I mentioned, when I lost on The Ultimate Fighter, like, you got to get a real job, dude. And that's what I did. And that allowed me to start building my resume. And so I continued. It's twice the work, though, right? So instead of just focusing on fighting.
It's 2 jobs.
2 jobs, bud. And so, and again, I had a family, so it wasn't like I'm packing up and moving to San Diego to go train, or packing up and going, for 2 weeks for a camp or something like that. So there was a little bit of an anchor here in Iowa, but yeah, no, I think that's a problem, especially back then. That I think it's different now. I think fighters are checking out a lot earlier. Like you're like, oh, I wonder what happened to that fighter, and you look and he's like retired even after a 3-fight win streak. Well, back then those fighters would fight, just they win 3, lose, okay, start all over again. People just didn't know when to pull the plug on fighting, but I think the realization there isn't as much money in it as people hope, the brain damage thing, there's a lot of fighters that are checking out earlier and focusing on their professional careers, and I 100% support that. Like I said, I don't want my son fighting. Like, he can make money doing something else. He'll make more money doing something else than fighting, getting punched in the face, unless the UFC restructures how they pay fighters, like there's absolutely no reason to go in there and risk your life there.
Yeah, actually, Jeff Neal is a story that I always go back to because I think when he was still number 8 in the world, which is only a couple years ago, he was still managing a Walgreens.
That's a perfect
Yeah,
example.
I think I don't remember the exact place, but it was a standard place, and he was just and he was like number 8 in the world.
Exactly, and a lot of people blame it on
because not everybody has sponsors and has the
the
abilities.
UFC doesn't allow you to have sponsors now.
Just using that, but people just sponsor you. You know what I mean, like family.
Yeah,
and things
but they
like
try
that.
to blame it on money. Well, they need to manage their money more. And it's like, no, you guys, like, look at the share cut. That the UFC fighters are bringing, the profit sharing compared to all these other professional sports. Now, I always fell for it. Like, I was always a huge Dana White fan, and I always defended him. Every time I met him, he was awesome. But just the stuff that he puts out lately, especially like I can't afford to pay them NFL money because I don't make NFL money. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. Like they don't make NFL money. They can't pay NFL money. Well, then it comes out, with this lawsuit, what kind of percentage they're sharing on profit compared to what they're making with these other professional sports. Just ridiculous. And so until something like that gets straightened out, I'm glad to see these fighters like realize that this isn't going to be their career before they hit 30 and then moving on, because my age, a lot of guys held on to it way too long.
But still a fan of the UFC.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course of MMA in general. Like
Fair.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this PFL card that's coming out in October. That Ngannou fight. Like, I just want to support him for standing up for fighters. So I'm gonna order that pay-per-view just solely to support fighters and let them know that there's other avenues out there besides just the UFC. And so somebody's got to stand up, and that's the problem, is these fighters aren't standing up with each other.
I don't remember the name. If I know it, but the owner of the PFL over there, that guy came out recently and said he's spending more on the Ngannou fight for the production than Dana just spent on UFC Noche. Now, who knows if that's true?
Yeah, I saw that, and I hadn't had a chance to.
But who knows what they could be doing then?
Reveal it, but
it seems like PFL is kind of really trying to make a run at being the clear number 2, at least.
Yeah, and will they ever be competitive with the UFC? No, but what's crazy about it is you start seeing that, like, these other leagues can survive with what they're doing and what they're paying. It's like, so what, like, UFC now has to keep shareholders happy. That's a big piece of the puzzle, right? When they went public, I think it was like 3 years ago. Now they've got not one owner, they've got thousands of owners, and so they've got to keep them happy. And
I think they may have made a little bit of a mistake with the ESPN deal, having to put on shows every weekend, because I believe they do 50 shows a year or 48 shows a year, so they don't miss much at all.
No.
But I would be remiss to say I do love the product. For me, for the most part, the fights are but I love fighting in general. I love combat sports. I love the respect that fighters show after the fight. 99% of the time, even fighters who may have had a exchange before the fight, when you watch them fight, you just usually see some kind of respect and love. But for me personally, I've realized that fighting doesn't feel like a game like other sports do. And I don't want to put down basketball or football, because you can get hurt in football, clear as day. You can blow out your knee in basketball probably fairly often.
Yeah.
But there's just something about, kind of just a fighter having to go in there and fight a guy in front of a... So actually, I wanted to ask you this. What do you think was the smallest crowd you've ever fought in front of?
That's a good question, too.
Not exact, but just curious.
You know what?
You hear stories of musicians.
That's a great question. I think, so like some of these small shows, they actually have like a lot of people there. But my first pro fight, I was lucky enough. I had only had like 3 amateur fights. Again, especially on this local scene, a lot of these guys have like 50 fights before they go pro, which is insane. But I think I had like 3 amateur fights. Again, the last minute fill in, and so they're like, you can fight pro. And it was Glory Fighting Championships, and it was their first promotion here. They had like a 30-something foot cage. Like, it was just wild.
Wow.
It was a wild opportunity, and it was at Vets Auditorium back then, right? Which is too big of a venue for MMA in Des Moines, at least at the time. And I was the first fight of the night, but they did an all-pro card. So there was no amateur lead up, and usually amateur guys are the ones that sell a lot of tickets, right? Because it's like,
so hungry. Yeah,
locally. They're like, I want to watch my buddy fight.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so like those are the ones that bring in the crowd. So like on this local circuit, like some of these shows now are doing like 8 amateur fights and then like 2 pro fights. You know, it used to be like 5 amateur fights, 5 pro fights or whatever, like a good mix. But those amateur guys are what pay for the card, you know? And so these, that card, they did an all pro card. And then they also had a lot of out of towners, which is never a good money seller, right? But I was the first fight of the card and I walked out to vets and felt pretty empty in there, man. it was, and looking at the pictures, like, again, it was the first fight of the night, so I understand that. But it was like, and I can't even remember if I stayed around for I think I'm out of bounds after that. So I don't know if it filled up after that, but I remember walking out there, I'm like, you can hear an echo in here.
Yeah. Are there any current Iowa fighters that you have kind of followed, or anybody that's on your radar? Even if they're not still in Iowa, or maybe
no, like I see a lot of Michael Boylan, and he's I believe a lightweight, and he had a big amateur career and he's transitioned to pro. And from what I hear and what I see, it looks like he's putting in the time, and he's doing the right thing. He's checking out different gyms, you know, and his home base is at Porcelli's and has been for a while, I think. But I hear he's doing all the right things. And so other than that, I don't know, like, a lot of guys that are going to be making that jump.
Yep.
But
would Tj Obrian do a bare knuckle fight for the right price?
So, you know, when it first came out, I was like, hell yes. Like, I've got to do it. I've got to do it, you know. And then now looking at, like, some of the guys from Omaha that they have them out there, you know. And
Jeremy Stevens just fought on bare knuckle, knocked dude out.
Yeah. I think he went decision, didn't he?
I thought I saw a highlight.
He dropped him.
So that's probably what I saw.
Yeah, he knocked out Rivera though the fight before that. But I do like to watch it. But after seeing like what's happened to some of those former fighters, they were like my age. They were like a group that was maybe a little bit older than me. But I'm just not built for it, man. Like I don't have a chin.
Most people aren't.
No, I love
Robert is.
Yeah,
I don't have a chin like that.
I would want to try it one time, possibly, like you said.
Yeah.
If the money's right.
But
not that I'd make anything from it. But
like I use a mouse on the daily, and my hand already hurts from like from fighting and stuff. Like, and I can't imagine, like, some of these dudes just absolutely wreck their hands, and I'm like, man,
well, even if they win,
Yeah.
they come out in the locker room.
Have you seen
beat
their
up,
hands?
So yeah,
It looks like balloons. I'm like, I mean, you can't mess his face up anymore, but my hands, they're in pretty good shape, so I'm not trying to do that.
Yeah, the first time I watched it was pretty visceral.
Yeah.
I was pretty surprised with how intense it was.
I love that shit though when they're like toe the line. I'm like, that's something primal, you know, like toe the line.
Very is.
I like that.
A couple local guys fought. One of the first ones I know, Josh Neer and Corey Simpson fought.
Yeah, and that was before
Corey Simpson fought in BKFC?
Yeah,
it wasn't KFC. It was this.
But it
other
was bare
promotion.
knuckle though.
Yeah.
Oh, bare knuckle.
Yeah. And then like
Ago Husic.
Oh yeah, he's been doing that
for Game Bread.
Yeah, so
Jorge.
That's something that's
bare knuckle MMA.
Him. Yeah.
That's probably honestly better than bare knuckle boxing for you, you know, because at least you're not standing right in front of each other and beating the shit out of each other. Brutal. But I've seen pictures of Ago's hands after that, and shit. Again, it's that balloon effect where it's
he
like,
had a good last fight.
Yeah, I think he won it, right?
Yeah, he won it.
Yeah,
He beat a UFC.
Yeah,
vet.
yeah.
So coming up throughout your career, was there ever a fight that was talked about, or even you mentioned Gaethje?
Yeah,
it's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Was there ever? I guess that would be the one probably. But was there ever a name or somebody that you on the local circuit you maybe hoped to run into that kind of went on to become? Was there any fight that you wanted you didn't get, or?
No, I had a fight I wanted back real bad. Like I lost to Chris Mickle here in Des Moines. I was again a young dude, 21 years old, just buzz on through everybody, and Mickle had came back from deployment, but he had been in wars with Jeremy. You know, he beat Jeremy one time, and then Jeremy got him with the spinning back fist that was heard around the world to knock him out. And
he's fought someone big too. I forget.
Yeah, he fought Jose Aldo.
Yeah.
So
wow.
So I was supposed to fight. Well, anyways, so I fought him. I was the champion. I did a tournament, 2 fights in one night, which they don't do anymore. You know.
Which promotion was this?
This was Midwest Skate
Were you the
Championships.
champion? Got it.
And so I went 145. it was a tournament for a #1 contender spot, and I choked out the first dude in like a minute and a half, and choked out the second dude in like 50 seconds. And then so I got a shot at the title, and I choked that dude out in like a minute and a half. And then I had to fight Mickle, and he was like my first like real vet, you know. And there was a potential WEC contract on the line, you know, for who could win. WC at the time was like we're only the it was like the UFC equivalent because they had the lighter weight classes like 45, 35, 25, and he beat me with an armbar. And then he had to go fight Jose Aldo though.
that was his prize, huh?
Yeah.
WC is where Pettis. He fought the last one. I think it was off the cage.
Did the Showtime kick? Yep. WC had some pretty big fights on him.
What are we at for time?
Oh, I don't have to. You guys are good. I definitely got probably another question or two to get out if we need to wrap it up. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Let's check time.
So, just so people are here real quick, can we get your 3 favorite current fighters? He mentioned his, all strikers. Speaking of Sandhagen, I really hope we get Sandhagen versus O'Malley now
I
at
think
some
everybody
point.
does, yeah.
But I heard a talking head say, which I kind of agree with, they're probably not going to make that fight because they want Sean to. They're probably going to give Sean a fight that they know he can probably win. I just think you ruin one of those guys potentially. You know.
The thing is, did you guys hear about his hip injury?
His injury, yeah, yes.
That's a serious thing. Like that's something like we were talking about Gorman earlier. Like that's something that may like go watch that dude walk around right now. Gordman's like walking around with a horrible limp. Like that is such a game changer. I've never personally had a hip injury, but from what I hear, it could be a serious thing. And I'm sure Sean's going to get all the best coaches, or I'm sorry, all the best physical therapists and doctors and everything. But if it's truly a torn labrum, it's going to probably be at least a year before he fights. And I'm sure Sandhagen's going to want to fight before
And if
that
it is
year.
truly a torn labrum, I mean, no disrespect to Marab, obviously, but it does change the way things look a little bit.
And respect
Just
for,
a little bit.
Like, I go back and forth on my thoughts on O'Malley, but for him not to just come out right away and be like, that's why I lost. You know, everybody's like, why do you look flat? Blah, 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 blah.
Well, and imagine the pressure of Noche being on your back.
know.
If they lost that fight,
They were hosts.
they were done. They
Yeah.
couldn't recreate any promo.
Yep.
They couldn't do like Dan Ige,
no.
Diego Lopez. They couldn't
Well,
do that.
The UFC's got a problem right now with just filling fights in general, you know,
Yeah.
and so especially they just don't have the cash cows at the big names, and so look at what we have: Alex Pereira versus Roundtree for a main event. And it's just
What
like
if Roundtree wins that fight? Oh my goodness.
he's got a possibility, man. Everybody,
If they have Roundtree, Marab, and Bilal,
yeah, God.
Dana's going to be. Not that I think they're great fighters. So I'm not saying
I
that.
didn't think about that.
But as far as like household names,
Yeah.
Dana is going to be. But we know, yeah, I know you got some stuff to sell. You got some things to do. I know. Can we get so that people know who are your 3 current favorite kind of fun fighters to watch?
You know, I would always say all time, I got to give it up for the Iowa boys, like all time, you know, the people.
So Lawler.
Yeah. I mean, even TJ,
Yeah.
Timmy, Josh Neer, all time, I would say that, you know, not active right now, but people that are active, I mean, the GOAT, John Jones.
Yeah, that's a big fight coming up.
Yeah.
If it actually happens.
Yeah. I like Sugar's style, and, you know, those are kind of the.
So for you, if you had to make a quick comparison, who would you compare yourself to a current fighter that people might recognize?
Oh man, I'm nowhere near there.
Of course not.
but,
Of course, I understand.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
You know,
I guess he can't really say
I
like,
kind of like.
oh, I feel like I fight like Pantoja, you know?
Yeah. I feel like Conor McGregor is like on my level.
Oh, you like to have a lot of fun.
No. I don't know. I like Mighty Mouse's style where he just kind of gets in there and, you know, does the job. He tries to end it as fast as possible and
he's
get
efficient.
it done. And he's efficient. Yeah, and he's he looks clean every time. And you know, at the same time, also I like that. Like Nate Diaz, Nick Diaz, and all of them are cool to watch, and they put on a good show. But at the same time, too, what about those 13, 14-year-old kids that are watching them and trying to get away from stuff? Meanwhile, Nate Diaz is smoking a joint or something on stage.
Yeah.
You don't see that stuff with like GSP, Mighty Mouse, some of those
That's
like
true.
Anderson Silva and stuff. I like the professionalism that they had to provide, but also they weren't as fun to watch as like Diaz throwing stuff and
Yeah, but if they
McGregor,
hadn't
so.
provided that professionalism, this sport would have never got where it is.
Yeah,
We
for
would have
sure.
all been like, think of like the UFC continued to have to try to promote Nate Diaz's, like it would have never taken off because they
Yeah.
nobody
That's
would have
actually
ever
a great point because
taken
I
him
do love
seriously.
those exciting guys too as
Yeah.
a fan.
Yeah.
That's actually a great point.
Like once St. Pierre, and again, when I started training like an athlete, a lot of it was watching what St. Pierre does. Like I just, and that, to me, that kind of training and that kind of discipline and presence is what catapulted the sport because we were still in a time, where Chuck Liddell, nothing against Chuck Liddell,
Chuck
but
Liddell.
like that,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, So I think it was perfect timing for guys like St. Pierre, like you mentioned, to bring that professionalism to the sport.
So, I think for me, I'm definitely an Israel Adesanya fan.
Yeah.
He is probably.
Style bender.
I just really love that. I do think he was the kid who didn't fit in. He was a little different.
Yeah.
Paints his nails and stuff.
Yeah.
I always joke. I always call him a murder nerd, but I think he owned it though.
Yeah.
He didn't hide from who he was to try to be cool. He honestly could have been a bigger star had he, and he's a big star.
Yeah.
But had he tried to be cooler and like not stick to painting his nails
Yeah.
and saying you'll be frozen like Elsa and doing the things he does, he might have been even bigger. But I
Yeah.
feel like Izzy did stay true to himself. And getting that Pereira win, no matter what anybody says, was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Like I lost my mind, and thinking about it now makes me get the chills a little bit because I do think that the pressure he had to be under to win that fight.
Yeah.
I can't even possibly fathom it. He loses that fight, his legacy is nowhere near the same. Love him. I'm a big Charles Oliveira fan.
Oh man.
I'm a big
Why did I
Charles
say that?
because speaking of professionalism,
Yeah.
but also being cool.
Yeah.
People love to watch Charles.
Yeah.
But he's super professional. He's very big on the sport. He loves everyone. I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah, I love him.
And I really
Have
I
you
really
seen
like
his
Tom
YouTube?
Aspinall. Of course, yeah.
Charles like YouTube pranks.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, no, he like goes around and pranks people like those
And
interviews.
he came from nothing. Like he shows like he didn't have a roof in his kitchen. His kitchen of the house he grew up in had no ceiling.
I don't care what anybody like. They've got that dude listed at 5'10". He was another guy. When I saw him in real life, I was like, this guy's like way bigger than me. And this was before it was like his second UFC fight. And I remember looking at him like, this guy's huge. Like I'm in the wrong weight class, and at the time like I'm shrinking, and I was pushing 6'2". I'm about 6'1" now, well over 6'1", and I felt like that dude was taller. But they got him listed at like 5'10" or something. I'm like,
Love
that's,
Oliveira,
that's
though.
bold.
So before we get out of here, if you could do me one favor, if you can give our boy here, Robert, one piece of advice for his next fight, what is it that you would give him? From one fighter who's made it to the pinnacle, who's kind of saw success and fought through adversity, what piece of advice would you give him, knowing he has a fight coming up?
2, stay consistent, right, and breathe. Like with
Appreciate it.
all my guys on the local circuit, like I cornered a lot of dudes, and all I always remind them is to breathe, because before I became super comfortable in the cage, you go watch these amateurs or you go watch these lower level pros, and they're all holding their breath, right? Breathe, buddy, breathe, and every chance you get, breathe, because when that 5-minute rounds aren't short, man, and like the average person's body isn't built for 5-minute rounds, and so breathe while you're in there.
Awesome. So I can't thank you enough for being here with us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks
Such
for
a
having
big
me.
deal.
This was fun.
Such a big deal. Anything that you have going on? Anything you want to shout out? Is there somewhere they should come look for a loan?
No. I like to keep my business. I don't like doing loans for people I know. Like I don't want to know. I don't want to know somebody's financial situation. So I like clients that I don't have a relationship with. They don't like to make things messy. So
Awesome. So this is Better Views, Better Meta, taking the eye out of media. It's Do Better. We had a former UFC fighter here, a legend in Des Moines. He will choke you because he has 8 legs and arms. That's why he's the spider.
And he's got gloves in his car.
And he has
Rides
gloves
around
in his
with
car. Thank you so much for being here. Can't appreciate it enough. Tj Obrian.
thanks, guys.
Thank you.